Hello and welcome. You're here with Kaleido Insights Analysts, where we are exploring the impacts of emerging technologies on key themes that affect our lives as consumers, the future of businesses, and of course, the ecosystems that we're all part of. I'm Jaimy Owyang, an industry analyst and founding partner here at Kaleido Insights, and I am joined by my stellar business partners, Jessica Groopman and Jaimy Szymanski. We are delighted to have you here, and we hope that you are staying healthy and well. Today, our discussion is going to be around the topic of inclusion and technology. To kick things off, Jessica.
Sure. I think it's probably a good idea for us to define what we're talking about when we talk about inclusion and technology. Yes. There are so many topics. We'll get to a lot of them today, but often this is termed or coined in the context of how products are designed. How are technology products and services designed? And the key question there is for whom? Optimized for whom? Whether it's a design or a service or an architecture or IoT or any, it doesn't have to be online or anything else, but what are these products optimized to do and for whom? This is a huge topic, and I'm sure many of our listeners have heard about things like bias in artificial intelligence or bias in data sets or so on and so forth. But I think it's important that we just kind of start by asking questions or thinking about this along the line of a product lifecycle. From the cradle to the grave, in other words, from the very beginning of the design and the intention of why we are producing this product in the first place, to how are we optimizing it, how are we bringing it to market, how are we measuring its impact? That's key to optimization. And when we talk about measurement, what is the business model in the first place? What are we optimizing for? And of course, what is the use? How do we collect feedback? How do we optimize based on that feedback? How do we optimize across multiple different stakeholders, whether it's our consumers, our business partners, policymakers, whatever? And even recycling. Is this a product that is designed to be sort of reused by multiple groups or in different fashions? So I'll start off there with just sort of setting the stage for what we're talking about.
That's great. In addition, we should also just talk about why this topic is important, some of the challenges and problems. Many folks in society don't have access to digital, which we will talk about. And also when they are included, they're not represented fairly, and this can create problems. But it's not just around ethics, though. Businesses are not serving the entire market that they could reach if they're not thinking about their whole customer base. So this is a business opportunity. So anything else from the high level would you add to that?
I'd say probably to also talk about what we mean by the for whom in inclusion and the term of inclusion itself. I think that we'll probably be covering everything from gender to race, ethnicity, age, disability, income, creed, access to technology. That's all part of this idea of inclusion. I think it'd be interesting, Jeremiah, you had shared on Slack, I think it was a couple of days ago, a conversation that you had. If you could talk a little about the word inclusion itself, I think that's also important to kick off with that.
It's limited, yes. So when we think about the stages, a negative stage would be discrimination. Another stage would be perhaps ignoring or not acknowledging a problem. Another stage could be saying, yeah, I see there's a problem, but that's not really mine to fix. It's acknowledging it, but doing nothing. And then there's a level which could be called inclusion, where I, as a powerful tech product manager, an Asian male in Silicon Valley, I can choose to allow you, a young Black woman, transgender, to use my app. And so that's what inclusion is. I can choose. We're exploring now. There's another level above this, and I'm only hearing a few voices around this, around autonomy or empowering, or when individuals can be independent, where they can make their own choices because they have their technologies, distributed technologies, blockchain, distributed autonomous organizations. These are all these things that we're seeing bubbling up, but it's not an official thing. So as we talk about inclusion, we just wanted to acknowledge that there are higher levels above that.
Yeah, you can also think of it as universal design for several or all different types of categories, or even, as we've heard coined, expansive design.
Yes,
to your point, this is a business opportunity. If you're serving more markets, all the better.
We also heard things around ecosystem, which is one of the themes here at Kaleido Insights, where there, for example, some people say we shouldn't call it Independence Day, the 4th of July holiday, but instead call it Interdependence Day, because we're all connected, especially through digital. So those themes are floating in the ether. Thank you for giving me that opportunity to bring that up, Jaimy.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important to define that or even to offer a new definition as we're going to be discussing this. Jess, you brought up an interesting point, though, in terms of thinking of sort of cradle to grave in product design and in AI design and how you can build inclusivity in, especially with the definition you provided, Jeremiah, as well, that you're not inviting others in to use your product or your app, but it's just built in from the get-go. And I think that there are probably two different tracks we could sort of explore here. One would be making sure that those who are building the products, that are coding the AI, are diverse in nature in terms of their actual, talent and their upbringing and all those other areas that I had discussed too, as well as in the data that you're using to train AI. I think that's also important that those diverse data sets are as prominent as some of the perhaps more non-diverse data sets that are currently being used to train AI models.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so many different parts of kind of the product lifecycle that influence what is included or excluded from a product experience. Right now it's the percentage of employees in technical roles, for example, at Facebook and Google that are Black is 2%. That has an outsized impact on what the outcome of those products are going to be. And there was a study done by Bloomberg that across 8 of the largest technology companies, only a fifth of the technical workforce are women. So these have sort of a, as you mentioned, Jaimy, the talent makeup influences the kind of downstream outcome of what is valued and also what is prioritized in terms of safety, in terms of security, in terms of positive outcomes, in terms of goals, all these sorts of things from a product perspective. That said, it's not just a talent question. The point around data and what data are we using to train systems and algorithms is crucial. There's some hilarious anecdotes that I have been part of several AI conference experiences showing, deep learning models to show beauty. And it turns out they're all white women. Even if you select for a man, they still are a white woman.
And similarly, at a conference once, I was identified looking at the camera in one of these facial recognition technologies in retail as an angry white male. So I was identified as, and I was like, interesting. It's like my age range was like 60 plus or something. I'm like, that's pretty offensive.
If I could also give one example, there was a test on machine learning, and they took a low-res image of President Barack Obama. So any human could tell it was him, but they asked the computer to decode it and add more detail, and it started to build it out what would this person really look like, it and ended up being a white male. Yes, President.
Because the training data that's used for that.
That's exactly. But the point is, the data going in was biasing it towards to be somebody that he didn't actually look like.
We have all these, funnier examples, but in reality, I think that why this topic was so top of mind for all of us was also some of the very serious examples that are in the news recently about facial recognition technology in particular being used in the wrong capacities. I'm reminded of, back in June, which the ACLU is still pursuing, but they had filed a complaint against the Detroit Police Department when Robert Williams was falsely identified via facial recognition. And he had served some jail time because of it, and he didn't commit the crime. So I think that we're going to see a lot of precedents being set now. The good news is Detroit Police Department kind of walked back on it and said from now on they will only use photos to identify because their facial recognition technology is not up to par yet. But that was one example that really came to mind for me when we talked about what we'd be discussing today.
Yeah.
Yes, and many of the big tech companies that offer that facial recognition software for law enforcement have pulled it back for usually a period of a year. What's interesting is they're pushing it on the government regulators to figure it out. So that's kind of a tossing it to somebody else. So that's a little unclear.
Yeah, very often in this space, there's sort of a blame game of pointing to the next, constituency within the ecosystem of responsibility and accountability. I think, Jaimy, you hit it on the head in terms of this question of threshold and accuracy. And for technology, especially AI vendors, marketing sort of high levels of threshold and accuracy, this actually is a huge responsibility. Because if we are sold products that are promised 95, 98% accuracy, but in fact, that 1 or 2%, margin of error leads to someone being prosecuted or someone being in prison, that's a huge, this is what we're talking about.
Yes.
That 1 to 2% is crucial.
Yes. In addition, if that 1 to 2% is always purple people and they always go to jail, that's a big problem.
Oh, you hit that right on the head, Jeremiah. I was looking at some data around the use, not only, I know we're talking right now about use of it in law enforcement capacity. However, a lot of AI algorithms right now are being used in healthcare capacity in order to help them to better allocate resources as a result of COVID-19. And Microsoft had been running a bunch of pilots in large hospitals to try to use AI. And I think it was a 6-fold increase of being able to identify issues before they happen through predictive modeling, as well as to thwart some of these cases of, let's say, infection in hospital and things like that. And so they were very happy with the initial results, that it was so successful. However, the accuracy was only if you were white. They compared it to Hispanic male data, to African American male and female data, and they found that it was a great thing to tout at first, that we were able to save hospitals a lot of money and save patients their lives, but to whom was it accurate? And that again goes back to the training data, as well as inclusion and diversity in hiring. I think it's also very important to continue to push that as well.
I'd love to talk about one of the techniques that I learned about from Microsoft's AI team. And I attended a session called Women Ethics in Tech, held by Microsoft in San Francisco pre-COVID. And it was fascinating for me to learn from this community of female engineers. And at Microsoft, one of the things they did that impressed me is they created actual physical card game. And as you know, the military uses these things to identify different people's faces who are the most wanted criminals. But they did it the opposite. They said, let's call these inclusion cards. And each card has a different persona. It might be an elderly Hispanic woman. It might be a transgender young Asian male at a very young age. It could be somebody who has physical different abilities that we don't have. It could be somebody who is impoverished, who just has a phone without the capability to use apps. Right. And so what they're impressing upon the mostly white young male engineers is that when they're building the product and the design, they take these cards out on the table and then they go through the scenario. What would our product and design be for this particular individual to really help with empathy and to think about how we can design products for the mass market? Of course, the business angle, I just want to underline this again, there's business benefits in addition to ethics and people. Yeah. So I think that is one way to overcome the struggle with the types of hiring that they've been able to do at this time. Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, Microsoft's program is one of the leading in the industry, and there's a few additional reasons for that. One of the things that struck me, sort of in the name of big tech and open source, is that they didn't just launch this program to be more inclusive generally. They actually merged it with their entire design program, but they open source the entire program. So you don't have to be a very, highly trained Microsoft designer engineer to access these tools. They're available to anyone open source online. So this is a good example of sort of optimizing internally, but also sharing those tools externally so that the rest of the ecosystem can benefit as well.
Oh, I would like to give some credit to...
Oh, go ahead.
Just quickly, I'd like to credit Mia Dan for organizing that event on women in ethics. So just thank you, Mia.
I was going to offer another tidbit. This must be just, a video cast on Microsoft because they are a leader in a lot of ways. But I'm not sure if either of you have seen what they're doing on blockchain as well to try to get some of these AI training data sets to be more diverse. They announced an initiative recently called Decentralized and Collaborative AI on Blockchain. And they're leveraging and incentivizing good data training sets that are diverse on blockchain, and they're decentivizing those that aren't. So you pay in a certain amount depending on how much data you're offering up for your data to be put onto the blockchain for analysis to see if it is good training data for AI. And if it is good, you get a refund. And if it is not good, you do not. So I think that that's a really great, another open source type way in order to make sure that multiple organizations are contributing data sets for various products, services, industries in order to make it better as a whole and try to get some good insights gleaned from that in terms of what does make good data. Because I know we talked a lot about, facial recognition and image recognition for a lot of these use cases, but it goes beyond that, as you both know. There's been analysis of voice recognition in particular, of the biggest voice assistants, from Siri, Alexa, et cetera, that show that unless you are a native white speaker, that you are unable to be identified most of the time. There was a stat, there it is, that you're twice as likely to incorrectly transcribe audio from Black speakers as opposed to white speakers. So it's been disheartening to read about the impacts that this has on those individuals who cannot be identified as easily by their virtual assistants. They say that it kind of, to them, feels like they have to adapt their identity and assimilate, even if interacting with an AI assistant.
Yeah.
So these impacts are much greater, I should say broader, than some of the just specific industry and product level impacts we've been talking about.
Yeah, it's really true. And, I'm reminded of, do we conform to technology or does technology conform to us, right? This is kind of this ongoing question in technology design. And Jaimy, you bring up something really interesting with that Microsoft example, sort of apropos of that, which is incentive. What is the incentive for contributing data, for sharing our data? What is the incentive for building a product that serves humanity versus building a product that serves your sort of highest growth customers? By the way, in financial services, we see a lot of these inclusive issue tools that are designed for rich people rather than lower income people, as an example. But this question of incentive is also important in terms of the design of services. For example, we have seen much ado about Facebook in the news as of recently, given the design of their business model to optimize advertising based on engagement which goes up when content is emotional, fear-based, etc. And so these dots are all connected. As you said, it's not just about AI or image and facial recognition. The fundamental way that we use technology, software, hardware, data to design these tools and business models is really about what are we optimizing for and for whom.
And incentivization, that's an entirely other topic, I think, too. I know we had talked a little bit about, today's conversation, and we should probably touch on digital footprint analysis a little bit here, too. The incentivization to contribute data, not only from a company level in terms of the example with Microsoft and blockchain, but what about from a personal level? What incentive do you have in control and in stewarding your own data to be used in good training models, let's say? But even larger than that, what if you do not have the same size digital footprint? You do not have the same data sources to glean from in order to participate in this AI-driven economy in many cases. Are you disadvantaged? Are you discriminated against? Oftentimes the answer is yes.
Yes.
So I'm curious to find other examples. I mean, there are some in their nascent stage right now of creating marketplaces for personal data in this way, but it doesn't get at the core issue of this digital divide and not having access to products and services because you do not have as big of a digital footprint.
Yep.
It is an issue. So one of the companies where you take a swab on your cheek and you send that data in, I think you know the name, and then it determines your data set. They have a low data sample set for a particular race, and unfortunately, fortunately, this data is being used to help identify potential genetic diseases and then find cures for them. But if those groups are not represented, that's a problem. So they are doing active marketing towards that particular race to try to encourage them to send in those sample sets. But that might be traditional marketing campaigns, discounts, making sure that the language is useful in a way that the recipient would understand. So there are some significant impacts towards longevity if this isn't solved.
Yeah, Jeremiah, you bring up an excellent point insofar as, we talk about the digital divide. There are precision products. And, in the example that you just gave us, sort of think about a genetic-based precision diet product or something. That sounds sort of futuristic and very cool. But it's not just access to that service. If, for example, the sort of genetic database and algorithms were not as optimized for a particular race, it's also access in the first place to any services. I mean, for example, we think of digital divide as both, do you have broadband connectivity? Do you have access to 4G or 5G or LTE or these kinds of things? But that in and of itself is sort of an upstream, question of access that also has several downstream impacts to the services you can access from there. Whether it's genetics, whether it's access to hiring tools, which use big data to,
or even healthcare,
or even
insurance
healthcare in the first place. Exactly.
Yes.
The ability to reskill, right? All kinds of different services, government services, financial mobility, as we mentioned a few minutes ago. This whole question of kind of what is included in the cultural zeitgeist is also a reflection of the tools that we use. Today, our tools are predominantly digital, obviously. But who does not have access to those tools? And it's not just about connectivity. That's really sort of phase one.
In addition, when we start to roll out internet access to one continent that doesn't have access, there are risks now where there's two technology companies, Facebook and Starlink, which is owned by Elon Musk, to provide internet access from satellites to Africa and other parts in Asia and perhaps South America. There is a risk, though, like if that is provided for free, what kind of business models does this emerge from this? Is this a form of digital colonialism? Don't want to get too sour on this topic, but this creates other issues as well when we provide people with access. So even the business models and the way we approach this from an ethical perspective needs to be carefully evaluated.
Yep.
Indeed. Another type of divide is knowledge, right? Do folks understand what they're signing up for in the first place and where the trade-offs are in the access to those services?
Oof, we covered a lot. Was there anything else
We
that
did.
we missed? I'm sure we missed something, and I'm sure that our excellent audience and community will inform us of other topics. Anything else to go around?
I would just invite, feedback and collaboration on this topic. I think this is more pertinent than ever, and we are researching this and analyzing this, and it's a critical topic. So be in touch.
It is. So here at Kaleido Insights, we have 5 research themes. Digital ethics is the very first one, and this is an important area, and we understand our role in the ecosystem to help companies, tech companies, and consumers in society. So thank you, Jaimy and Jessica. This was an insightful discussion. Quick correction. The theme is digital trust, not digital ethics, but they're certainly interlinked.
Yes.
You can learn more about our themes and our coverage if you go to kaleidoinsights.com. And please join us next time. We're going to analyze other impacts of these emerging technologies to business, consumers, and society. Thank you for watching.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Stay well.